Power on.
The following is a presentation of the Sovryn Tech podcast feed.
It's Fighter Renegades, a Star Wars podcast.
Ooh, it is time for a TIE Fighter Renegades, and this is a show where we get to get fully nerdy and just geek out, all that good stuff. Even though sometimes I would, I used to do it at the end of a Sovryn Tech episode, we can do it here. And not only that, but we've long established, Rob and I, that TIE Fighter Renegades is more than just a Star Wars show. And so there's a subject which actually played into recent episodes of Sovryn Tech in the Sovryn Technica feed that I really want to get into because things have changed a lot. I've talked about on Patreon content how pleased I am that Avatar: The Way of Water has done so well. What is it? The number 4 top box office success in history. So it's it's the 4th highest grossing film in history. Now, granted, as I said on Patreon, account for inflation and nothing is even touching Gone with the Wind. Nothing. Okay, you account for inflation, you have a different list. The first Avatar movie would still be on that list, but in the world we live in right now, or in the inflation rampant world that we live in, Avatar: The Way of Water is at number 4. With its predecessor still being number 1. By the way, before we go much further, okay, real quick, I just want to inject this. What you are getting here, so especially if you're a Sovryn Tech patron, and I know probably 99%, and this is true for every podcast, no matter how big, even like the Twit audience, I doubt even 1% of their audience is like, part of the in the club Twit, which is like their kind of quasi Patreon. Anyway, I know that not even 1% of my audience is a Sovryn Tech patron. If you want to be a patron for what's being done in the Sovryn Technica feed, please, by all means, go to patreon.com/SovrynTech. Link is in the show notes. But anyway, if you are a patron, you are getting daily content now. At least 5 times a week anyway, that doesn't include weekends, but so 5 times a week, that's daily, not counting weekends, or you're getting weekday content. How about that? Every single day. And that's an exciting prospect for me, to be able to get this much, get this much out, but you will be getting episodes, or if it's like, readings of audiobooks, like what I've been recently doing with The Ego and Its Own by Max Stirner and so on. Every single day, every single weekday, you are getting content. Now, back to talking about content, which certainly there's a meta conversation to have around the problem of the term content, but that's not necessarily what we're going to get into here. So while I've been very pleased at the success of Avatar: The Way of Water, and really a top franchise for me right now, not all the way at the top. Certainly Star Wars probably still holds that number, partly because, it should be Star Trek, right? Babylon 5, I don't know that you exactly want to call that a franchise. Otherwise, nothing would beat that. That'd be franchise 0, I guess. But, Star Trek has been so tarnished in the past, since 2017. Even Star Wars hasn't been irreparably tarnished. But Star Trek, and I've gotten questions about this on Patreon as well that I've talked about, Star Trek has been completely irreparably damaged. There is no saving that franchise in the future. It's just impossible. Like, you could make the greatest Star Trek show ever, and Star Trek is still ultimately, it just can't achieve former glories, as to where pre-2017 was the greatest shit in history, man. but now it's, for me anyway, it's going to, eventually probably pop out of my top 5. Highlander's beating it. Like, just about everything's beating it now. It's so terrible. I didn't think things could get much worse than new Battlestar Galactica or Game of Thrones as far as shit shows, but Star Trek they've pulled it off. You know, they have amazingly taken the greatest fictional universe ever devised, and they've turned it into arguably some of the worst television shows ever devised, if not the worst. I mean, I can think of all kinds of things that I would rather, like, I mean, aside from, you know, jamming a pencil into my ear, I can think of all kinds of things that I would rather watch than Discovery or Picard or Lower Decks. I mean, they're terrible. Anyway, that's besides the point. Well, I'm just getting the pecking order down for you here, okay? But anyway, something I was excited for, you know, and I talked about it again on recent episodes of Sovereign Tech, where, you know, like what was going to be happening with the DCEU, with this kind of soft reboot, as it were, coming from the potential success of Black Adam. Unfortunately, there was debate around what that success actually was, and ultimately that it wasn't a success. And because of that, James Gunn has come in, along with Peter Safran, and they are now co-CEOs of the DCU. Now, what they are CEOs of, is basically everything DC that is not the comic books. Okay? At one point, it sounded like, I mean, these announcements get so clustered. At one point, it sounded like they were also in charge of the comic books, which, you know, I like James. Let's be clear here. I don't really have any thoughts about Safran in any, however you want to pronounce his name, in any way. But James Gunn, I have thoughts about. And I largely like the guy. And I think Guardians of the Galaxy are still some of the only, I mean, very few good products to come out of the Marvel machine ever. You know, along with like Iron Man and maybe a couple other films here and there. But yeah, like I cautiously trust James Gunn to do things right. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have a whole lot to talk about here, because we got to break down what exactly he said and, you know, what are my thoughts on what's going to be happening going forward. But when James Gunn came in, he decided to not do a soft reboot, but a full on, like, he's like, all right, everything that kind of came before, almost everything, I should say, is no longer part of, you know, this larger DCU. So, but again, like I said, initially it sounded like he would have had control of the comics. Look, like I said, I like James Gunn. I have no idea how good he is at doing comic books. So it's just as well that he's not in charge of those. That's fine with me. But he is going to be in charge of television, movies, and video games. That's a key point to bring up. And that all of these will now be a unified universe. As in, you know, what happens in the video games is canon, what happens in the TV shows is canon, and what happens in the movies, it's all a shared canon. It's a very ambitious thing to do, especially when it comes to video games. But, you know, it's not like Star Wars hasn't effectively, actually, I mean, everything with Star Wars is canon. How well that's worked out, that's certainly a conversation we'll have. And if you're wondering, you know, where's Rob? We've got episodes coming up, don't worry. And we're going to be talking about everything. Andor, Bad Batch, you know, all the stuff that's going on. And of course, we have Mandalorian Season 3 on the way, so we'll be getting to that. But back to James Gunn. So this is ambitious because you're playing in a universe with characters that, you know, we could talk about Star Wars. We're like, oh, Star Wars is just universally loved for, or quote unquote, universally loved for, you know, since 1977, right? Well, we're talking about characters that have been loved since the 20s or the 30s. And I don't mean the 2020s. I mean the 1920s and the 1930s. Okay. We are talking about some of the most ancient characters in entertainment as we understand it. And, you know, those are, that's a tall order, you know, really to take on. Now, part of my concern here, okay, is that as much as I trust James Gunn, James Gunn effectively took characters that most people didn't really know about, right? Like Star-Lord, you know, and Drax and so on, you know, the Guardians of the Galaxy. He introduced them But that's the thing, is that in a lot of people's mind, there's not a whole lot of expectation of what those characters ended up needing, or what those characters would end up looking like. I'm not saying that he didn't pay some fidelity to the comic books. I actually think he did an interesting job with that. If not so much fidelity, regardless, he did an interesting job with it. Just that's a lot, in my opinion. Believe it or not, that's actually an easier thing to do, because he already had a Marvel universe that he was attached to, so people want to go see the latest Marvel film. And then you have characters that don't have, where there's not a lot of preconceptions. Again, where with most, or with a good chunk of DC's, cast of characters, people know, whether they're comic book fans or not, they have a very good idea of what Batman is, have a very good idea what Superman and Wonder Woman and so on are. This is a challenge. This is a different challenge than what James Gunn has done before. So I can't just say, oh, well, he did great with Star-Lord and, in the Guardians of the Galaxy, he's going to do awesome with this. No, there's no guarantees of that. I am disappointed. I really am disappointed that Henry Cavill is not coming back as Superman. I thought Man of Steel was a phenomenal film. I think that Zack Snyder's Justice League, full title, was one of the greatest comic book movies ever made. Effectively, for all of this to get erased, this sucks, and now we have had, and part of the reason I didn't do this episode sooner is I wanted to let the dust, first I wanted to actually hear what James Gunn had in mind, and we're going to break down every show and movie that he announced. We're going to talk about that here, okay? But also I wanted to see some of the fallout from industry veterans, as it were. Like some other people, what are their thoughts on it? Including, what did The Rock think? Because I even though The Rock wants to come out and say that he wasn't trying to, shall we say, Vince McMahon, the DCEU, I think he most certainly was. I mean, hell, I've got the t-shirts that say, oh, the DC universe, the hierarchy of the DC universe is about to change. And yeah, certainly The Rock was looking to be, at the top of that hierarchy. And I actually applauded. I thought that could have been, Black Adam versus Superman could have been not only tremendous action on the screen, but could have been one of the greatest philosophical battles of all time. I'm not going to deep dive on that unless it makes sense later on, but I've talked about that in other episodes, and certainly you can hunt that down. But anyway, I am ultimately disappointed about what's happening. The fact, or a lot of the ideas clearly that Warner Brothers originally had in mind with the soft reboot of Black Adam, that they're not happening. Yeah. I mean, this is disappointing for me. Like it really is, because as I reviewed, I thought Black Adam was a great fucking movie. I mean, the greatest comic book movie of all time? No. But it was a great movie. And certainly a better comic book movie than, 80% of what Marvel's, shit out. So anyway, The Rock has come out now after a lot of the announcements, and we'll get into the announcements, but The Rock has come out and said he is not opposed to playing the role of Black Adam in the future. And this is important because there are still movies that could be considered part of the Snyderverse or part of the old DCEU, as it were, that are going to get released, like Shazam! Fury of the Gods, which, Black Adam is initially very much a Shazam villain, a Shazam character, has been for, 80 years, or going on 70, 80 years. But anyway, so we'll talk about it. Why don't we go ahead? Let's break into it. Okay. I've given you my thoughts about James Gunn. I'm cautiously optimistic about what he can do with this, what he can do with DC characters, these absolutely legendary, larger than life characters. But let's talk about what he has in mind. So as far as movies go, the only one that was announced, and there was, you can watch the video. It's like a 5-minute video where he just lays everything out. He says fantastic way too much, but that's fine. I can be repetitive with my adjectives often enough. So anyway, so the one movie that did get a release date as far as new film getting made by James Gunn that's not a pre-existent movie, say like The Flash or Shazam! Fury of the Gods, again, we'll talk about those, is the new Superman film. And the film is Superman Legacy, and it's going to be coming out July 11th, 2025. Now, let's be honest. that date could change, in a minute. I mean, there's no real hard date on that. So don't really get your hopes up on this. As far as trusting a release date, minus a pandemic, the only time you can even begin to count on a release date is if maybe, maybe if they said that, the editing's done, maybe. But today, I think editing's getting done like right before it gets, streamed to the theaters. And I say stream because there's no trucks, the Teamsters aren't actually like driving trucks of film to theaters anymore. It's just getting sent around on hard drives. Might as well be streaming. Anyway, so this date, that's a soft date. I mean, I guess he had to give some kind of a date, but don't count on this shit. Okay. As far as, what his plans are for this film, James Gunn's making it clear he wants it to be a more hopeful Superman. He wants it to, in fact, he's explicitly said he wants it to be a Superman who has a fear of harming a single living soul. Those were his exact words. I'm okay with that. Like, I'm fine with that. I loved what Zack Snyder did with Man of Steel, and I thought Henry Cavill's portrayal was incredible. But okay, and hey, with any of this stuff that he laid out, there's no announcement of actors. There's nothing like that. I mean, they're going to milk the marketing machine around this forever. Speaking of that, quick, before we continue down the list, let me say this. I want to give James Gunn actually some credit for he is, and granted, this is its own marketing for sure, but he is going after even the smallest of blogs and their kind of BS stories on like Twitter. Like, he's going right after these people where, some blog will say, oh, like this is the actor for Superman or whatever. And James Gunn will say, no, I have made no announcement about an actor. I can tell you there's no actor chosen right now. And I love that. I love it that he is shooting down all of these dumbass little YouTube channels and these dumbass fucking blogs who don't have a fucking clue, and they're all doing clickbait and whatever, what do they call it, gurning or whatever, the faces they make on their thumbnails and everything. I mean, he's just tearing these people apart in a nice way. I read it as vicious and I love it, So I want to give James Gunn credit for like going after the fucking critics, and going after. I mean, is he kind of attacking the fans? I mean, at least he's not. Here's the thing. You could say some people I think might feel he's attacking the fans. I don't think it's that. You know who attacks fans? That's Ryan Johnson. Okay. When you put out a picture of you holding up a sign that says your Snoke theory sucks. No, you're an asshole. James Gunn is just, setting the record straight. Those are two very, very different, schemes, attack vectors, maybe. Again, I don't even necessarily want to say it's an attack. He's just, he's nipping all these things in the bud, and I absolutely love seeing it. Like it's a joy, to not that there's much joy on Twitter, but boy, if there was, it'd be what James Gunn is doing right there. I got to give him credit for that. Anyway, so with Superman, we're looking at a old-fashioned Superman. Again, I have no problem with this. That's fine. It's a Superman movie. Honestly, it's going to do insane numbers no matter how the film turns out. No matter what the attitude of the movie is. It's going to do insane numbers because you have, one of, if not the biggest fictional character in history. So it's just guaranteed money. But it could suck. Really, James Gunn could get this wrong. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, next movie, The Authority. This was an interesting pick. Well, I guess, all right, hold on. Before we get into The Authority, I guess with Superman, let me just say, I mean, nothing's ever going to top, the 78 Superman. I mean, easily one of the greatest movies ever made. You're not going to top Christopher Reeve. Everybody is going to play second fiddle to Christopher Reeve. So, I don't need this to be the greatest movie ever. That's already come and gone. But it's just got to do a pretty good job. set up Superman, and because Superman is the linchpin of your universe, so of course you got to set him up, and it's the movie you want to start with, and it's an easy way to make money. I have no problem. I understand this, the business side of this. Fine, whatever. Okay, going on to The Authority. This is a bold move and this is one where I think James Gunn could shine, because people, outside of comic book fans, they don't know The Authority. Okay, The Authority is like this, they're this really brutal Justice League, where they think that, all the non metahumans, like all the non superheroes, are kind of dum-dums, and they need to be shown how it's done, and they need to be shown the way, and blah, 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 and even by force. And that's what The Authority does. I think that this movie would be an excellent movie to make and to release directly after Superman, because you're going to make an incredibly dark film. And I don't even mean sardonic like Suicide Squad, which also James Gunn did a great job with the Suicide Squad, in the beginning. This is good. This would be a very, very dark film. I think you need to make a movie like Superman Legacy, if it's going to be that down hokum and bright, to offset and even let parents know, hey, like, yeah, we know this is a really dark film, but don't worry, Superman, everything's going to be, sugar or sweetness and light somewhere. Anyway, so The Authority, that should be pretty interesting. I thought that was a pretty bold move, to make a movie on that. And I imagine James Gunn is trying to, he's pulling, this is going to be his Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Okay, The Brave and the Bold. Let's move on to the next film, The Brave and the Bold. This is going to be a Batman and Robin story. Honestly, Robin has never gotten a fair treatment, in my opinion, in theaters. And the interesting thing around this, okay, is they are not going with Dick Grayson. They are not going with Tim Drake. They are, or any other Robin. They're specifically going for Batman's son in this. So you are getting Damian Wayne, of course, the offspring of Bruce Wayne, Batman, and Talia al Ghul, daughter of Ra's al Ghul. So this could work. I like Damian Wayne as a character. I think he's ultimately, I think he's kind of annoying. I think he's kind of, is there a male term for Mary Sue that I don't know it, but he's a little too good and too young, even though I understand his lineage and, that sets up a lot. He can be a bit of an annoying character. The only problem, I think it could be fine. And The Brave and the Bold offers it, or opens the movie up to bring in a lot of characters in the Batman family, as well as a lot of villains, both of which are wins, in my opinion. I just hope that either Nightwing shows up. I'm disappointed that Dick Grayson, outside of Batman Forever, a fantastic film, has never really gotten a fair shake, in my opinion. And he's never been allowed to evolve. Which the power of the character of Robin has always been that it is the character that evolves. Batman doesn't evolve. Batman's a fucking stone statue, right? Robin is the character that evolves, and in many ways, especially in the 80s, let me tell you, and before Tim Drake, by the way, but in many ways, really the evolution of Dick Grayson from Robin to Nightwing showed a passage of time in DC Comics, especially in the 80s. Okay. And it also, you've got to understand the power of a character like this, where, when you're a little kid reading comic books, okay, you can relate to the naivete perhaps of Robin, right? Of Dick Grayson. But then you get to watch Dick Grayson grow up, and you as the child, like me in the 80s, you're like, oh, I can grow up, I can become Nightwing. And then, it keeps on going. And if you remember, even, in, more recent Batman comics, not in the past, 5 years, but a little before, Dick Grayson got to take on the mantle of the Bat for a little while. And you get this progression that you can only get with a very young character, and keep building up. Okay. And so it's disappointing that we don't get that evolution, particularly of Dick Grayson, who is, I mean, again, like this guy, in my opinion, yeah, he's not Batman or Wonder Woman or Superman, but I always felt that Nightwing was like the heart of the DC universe, because he shows how the universe itself can evolve. And like, especially the 90s Nightwing series run, comic series run. I mean, there's a reason that issue number 1 went into like 10, 12 printings, because that was such a hot comic. And I think a lot of people felt exactly what I feel about the character of Dick Grayson. So a part of me is a little disappointed that we don't get those stories, at least not right away. We could get them in animated, and we're going to talk about animated, because animated films, this is going to be a clinchpin issue for me, or a major issue for me, when we talk about it. Not necessarily all negative, but, well, we'll get into it. Anyway, Brave and the Bold. Okay, this should be interesting. And particularly because, not just because Robin is there. Again, I wish it was a different Robin, but it's fine. But it'll be great to have other members of the Bat family in, which I'm sure we will, as well as really Batman's ultimate strength isn't even just Robin. It is Batman has probably the strongest cast of villains of any other comic book character. And to be able to take advantage of that in a super film, like something called The Brave and the Bold, and not The Batman or something, really boring like that, that gives us a lot of options. So I'm fairly excited for that. Next film, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. Now, this is apparently being lifted straight out of Tom King's fantastic DC run recently, which was titled Woman of Tomorrow. This is a very different Supergirl. I would have loved it if they did like Red Lantern Supergirl, because I thought that was a kick-ass storyline, but that's not really happening as far as I can tell yet. Anyway, maybe we'll get to the point. Maybe we'll get into a chapter 2 of the DCU, which it is annoying that, yes, what is he calling it? Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. Like, I'm so tired of, this is phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and all. Just fucking stop. We can have a conversation around that momentarily as well. But maybe we get to like chapter 2 or chapter 3, and by that time we can actually have like, Blackest Night storylines, major events or major movies like that, which that would be insane to see on screen. But anyway, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, this is a science fiction story, and I applaud that overall, because one of my favorite things about Man of Steel, the movie Man of Steel with, Cavill as Superman, was it turned Superman into a science fiction character, more so than a superhero. And I applaud that move. And if they're going to pull that with Supergirl, great. Dynamite. Can't wait to see it. And if it's a direct lift from Tom King's work, we're in for a treat. Next movie, another one of my favorite DC characters, Swamp Thing. Now, this is apparently going to be a horror film. Here's the beauty of that, okay? If you don't know about Swamp Thing, go get reading up on Alan Moore, okay? The beauty of this is that we get different genres, but there's still genres that play in the fantastic, okay? There are times, and certainly this is going to happen as well with this list that we're going to break down, or that we're going down. There are times where it's abundantly clear. You think of something like WandaVision, where clearly they want to, like, Disney just needs to put out some kind of fucking content on Disney Plus. And so they come up with dumb-ass, sitcom-ish, whatever kind of ideas. And they are effectively low rent, as in, not a big special effects budget. They are low rent TV shows that try to do like artsy things to make you think that it matters, or to explain why you're not seeing Scarlet Witch kicking ass nonstop. Okay. And I think that these kinds of shows are ultimately boring. But because you could say, well, no, Marvel does play in other, genres, but it's these kinds of shows. No, I want other genres, yes, but still make them part of the fantastical. And Swamp Thing, being a horror film, still falls in that realm. I'm very interested to see what they do with this. There have been a lot. I mean, there have been, 2 Swamp Thing movies before. There have been multiple Swamp Thing TV series. And most of that stuff turns out pretty well. Maybe different than what you'd expect from the comic books, but usually, turns out pretty well. I particularly love the Swamp Thing, the two Swamp Thing movies from the 90s. Huge fan of Lee Majors' role also as Swamp Thing in the TV series. So I'm excited to see where this goes. And, I'm all about having a DC horror film. Like, totally. There's plenty of characters that they could really play with that. And also it just not be Constantine all the time. I mean, you have Justice League Dark, you have Phantom Stranger, you have so many characters, the Spectre, you have so many characters you could bring in, but Constantine, it's like, shut up. Okay. If Keanu Reeves couldn't pull it off, just stop. So, anyway, that's it for the slate of films, new movies getting made under James Gunn's, plans for chapter 1. Let's go into television shows. And this is where we will start to talk about animated shows. But I'll tell you what, I'll save that for last. So, okay, television shows. First one is Waller. Of course, around the character of Amanda Waller, head of the Suicide Squad, and so much else within the DC universe. I think this is great. Viola Davis I thought she's been doing a phenomenal job, and she's really been the cornerstone of the DCEU. And, when she shows up, everything just goes up to 10. I really, really dig the character. So for her to get a spin-off series that's, playing off of Peacemaker, which, I can't stand John Cena, but Peacemaker is just dynamite. And we are still getting Peacemaker season 2. I'm intrigued to see where this goes. I'm all about it. And, it's funny though, because they're keeping Viola Davis. She's playing the same character. So an important point to bring up. James Gunn said in that little 5 minutes that he did announcing, what's coming for the DCU. He said that there will be Elseworlds films. There will be other universes, right? Like the Batman with the sparkling vampire there, in skinny pants. He's going to be in his own universe. I'm glad about that, really. And then, and he said something odd about Shazam, which we got to get into that. But he said that Shazam has always kind of been its own thing over here. But, again, Waller is effectively, it seemed like James Gunn was saying that parts of the Snyderverse could still crop up every once in a while. Okay. And that maybe not everything from the past has been erased. We'll see. But with Waller still, with Amanda Waller still being around, played by the same actress, it does make you wonder. Of course, DC is, best known for its multiverse. So anyway, Waller looks great. I'm all for that. Lanterns. This is one where I'm a little concerned. So it's going to center around Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart. And it sounded like he was saying that it was going to take place on Earth, and it was going to be kind of like this little detective story. And this is where it feels like, okay, so you want to introduce the Green Lanterns, probably because, like I had said earlier, you want to eventually do a Blackest Night movie, which would only make sense. But you only have so much budget. It's risky to introduce the Green Lantern. I mean, the concept of the Green Lantern Corps is kind of oddball, even though they're just space police. It's still kind of oddball. That you want to ground them perhaps in reality by making something that is very low budget and low key, because this is what it sounds like. It sounds like a low budget, they'll have little things where they could do little things with their ring, but it's not going to be, an action extravaganza or, more of a science fiction epic like we generally expect from Green Lantern stories and have expected from Green Lantern stories for over 50 years. 50. Yeah, 50. Sometimes I forget what year we're in. Anyway, so, this part bothers me because, no, if you're going to do Green Lanterns, let's go all the way. You should be in outer space. You don't need to be on Earth. Let's get out there. Let's do the strange shit. And that's not what they're going for. But like I said, I could kind of see where they feel like they have to do a slow burn in introducing the concept of Green Lanterns to the populace. And this is going to be on TV. So if they needed to do budget cuts somewhere, again, I guess I can see where they're coming from, but I don't dig it. Anyway, I could end up being wrong. You know, it's going to be Hal Jordan, which I applaud that. Jon Stewart, which I applaud that. You know, the important thing is having Hal Jordan in there. I'm still just always amazed that Kyle is no longer like my head is still in the space that Kyle Rayner's like, that he's the Green Lantern, because DC pushed that so hard for so long. And now we've come full circle after the 90s to where, no, Hal Jordan's the man, and seemingly is, you know, always will be. Okay. Well, I told them that, and then I've been saying that forever. I guess, you know, the people at DC finally just caught up to that. Okay. Paradise Lost. This is cool. This is going to be, I mean, the only thing that's not cool about it is that I don't know why everybody feels like they have to have a Game of Thrones. And this is effectively going to be the DC's Game of Thrones. It's all going to be on Themyscira, and it's, you know, without Wonder Woman, it is the island that Wonder Woman comes from, and, you know, telling the history of that island and everything, which there's certainly plenty to explore within that. So ultimately I'm excited for this, even though I could do without the fucking, like, if the theme song has cellos, I'm just going to shit myself, because I'm so sick of that. You know, like, everybody wants to copy the theme song for Game of Thrones for some reason, and not just the theme song, but they grab the actors from it. They, you know, want to lift the story and the tone and everything. And it's like, no, you know, who said it worked in the first place? Okay. 'Cause it got all the dum-dums into it. Well, comics aren't for dum-dums, but whatever. So we'll see. I dig that. Like, ultimately, those complaints aside, I dig the idea. Booster Gold. There's going to be a Booster Gold series. This is cool. I like Booster Gold as a character. You know, Booster Gold is effectively like a guy who is a nobody from the future, but with advanced tech from the future, he comes into the past to effectively be somebody. He's just been a classic in my mind since the 90s. Very funny guy. His, you know, arguments with Blue Beetle and everything have been, you know, are legendary. Of course, that was before the modern Blue Beetle, but regardless, it worked in the 90s. I think Booster Gold's going to be a very funny character. This is going to be, you know, we know we're going to get season 2 of Peacemaker. Booster Gold, in my opinion, would be the natural fit to replace kind of the comedy of Peacemaker. So it's a natural fit for a TV show. So I can dig that. Now, so those are the live action television shows that have been announced. Keep in mind, everything here, James Gunn just says this is for starters. He could have more that could come out during this chapter 1 Gods and Monsters phase. But now let's get into the animated realm, which starts off with Creature Commandos. Now, Creature Commandos is an odd choice. I mean, comic book fans know what that is, you know, and it is like, I mean, I don't know how, it's not really going to get into horror stuff, but, you know, you have like you have your like a bride, you have the Bride of Frankenstein. I mean, you know what you're getting. You're getting like Monsters Greatest Hits after a fashion here. And like, this is fine. The 2 points that are interesting. One is James Gunn said that animated series, the voice actors that they bring in for animated series are people that they plan to use whenever the characters leap from animated to live action. Now that's great. And I mean that. That's great, because, you know, as solid as Rosario Dawson did with Ahsoka, like, it's always going to suck that we never got Ashley Eckstein playing Ahsoka in real life. And I really think she could have. But whatever. I mean, I still think no matter what, it doesn't matter how good the show Ahsoka is. For people that know, I think Ashley Eckstein's always going to be Ahsoka, just like for many Star Wars fans, myself included. And I like Hayden Christensen a lot. You know, in fact, I mean, I like his work even outside of Star Wars. I've talked about it tons of times. You know, Jumper, Virgin Territory, and a bunch of others. You know, who's Anakin Skywalker? Matt Lanner. Matt Lanner is Anakin Skywalker. End of story. So anyway, yeah, so I think that's a cool idea on James Gunn's part. We'll see how well that works out. My big problem here is the one area that DC was smoking Marvel on, and really any other comic publisher on, was the DC animated universe. Okay. And I don't just mean like from the 90s with, the Bruce Timm stuff. Okay. Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, Batman Beyond, Justice League Unlimited, and so on. Even though that's, for many, like those cartoons are considered not just great comic book adaptations, but the greatest cartoons ever made out of anything. And for good reason. But they're animated movies that they're DCAU that they started making when New 52 started. And they've been doing Elseworlds with that as well. Like, Gotham by Gaslight for Batman and some others. And Batman Ninja, which is might even be the greatest comic book movie ever made. I mean, like they're just doing amazing shit with that. And it really sucks because they created and I know I've said this a million times because I used to review every DCAU film because I wanted people to watch this so much because it's like, oh, DC's got to copy Marvel. DC's got to copy Marvel. Got to copy the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU. And I'm like, yeah, they already did. And they're actually doing it better. It's animated, so nobody watches it apparently. but they're killing Marvel. like Marvel movies. Look, I know I rip on Marvel all the time. Marvel does make some good films, but even the best Marvel movies, and I'm not saying this because I hate Marvel, or I don't hate Marvel, but I'm not saying this because I can't stand the MCU. I do hate the MCU. Okay, I'm not saying this because I can't stand the MCU. All right, because I'll give credit where it's due there. All right, I am saying this just straight up as a person who, as I've said a billion times, you cut my arm, and it bleeds comic book ink. You understand? That's how much I'm into comic books. I'm saying this as a comic book fan. Nothing comes close to what the DCAU has done. And it is an interconnected canon, and there's even Elseworlds that shoot off and everything. It is stunning work. I cannot even begin to imagine that James Gunn is going to be able to match what was being done in the DCAU over the past decade. Even Zack Snyder, as great as he is, was never going to top what was happening in the DCAU. It's just not going to happen. Though all that shit is so good. And now it sounds like that has come to an end. Unless they're going to keep doing shit with Elseworlds. I don't know. But ultimately it sounds like that is coming to an end. So Creature Commandos, okay, whatever. That'll be fun stuff. I like his idea of having the voice actors transition to live action. All that's fine. My disappointment is that this is the one place where DC was absolutely succeeding on all counts. And you're just going to rewrite it? Or you're just going to stop this? Like this beautiful continuity? What a shame. What a shame. Now, let's talk a little bit about what's already in the hopper. What's coming. So you do have Shazam! Fury of the Gods coming in March. I know that there was a big story going around that Black Adam turned down the role to be in Shazam because he could, or The Rock could have been in it, or I said Black Adam turned it down. The Rock turned it down. I would not be surprised if he still shows up. Really. I know that a lot of there have been a lot of claims of things getting written out of, say, like the Flash movie, like Wonder Woman was supposed to be in it and other people, and all that's getting pulled. I would be intrigued for them to, because this is all in the editing room. I guess I just kind of wonder if they don't splice something in. Being hopeful, but who knows? Anyway, Shazam! Fury of the Gods. So, like I said, James Gunn's words on that particularly were, he's always been off kind of doing his own thing. So, the first Shazam movie was rightfully so a success. That's why there's a sequel. And I would love if that got to continue on. I would love if that was the opening for The Rock to come back in, as Black Adam. We'll see. I don't know. But I am excited for that. I'll certainly be going to theaters in March of this year to see that one. I was, he did talk about Blue Beetle, how Blue Beetle's coming, the movie's coming. I don't know. I'm neither here nor there on that. What I'm really shocked by is that he did not distance himself away from the Flash film, considering the clusterfuck that is the life of one Ezra Miller playing the Flash. And he's James Gunn was saying it in that 5-minute clip that, or I don't know, what, 8 minutes, however long it was. He was saying right in it that this is an amazing movie, fantastic movie. Like, he's really confident in this. And he came out, and said specifically, this is Flashpoint. This is going to reboot the universe. So this is what, the Flash movie coming out later this year, what is it, June this year, 2023, is going to allow for this new, a slate of films and TV shows and animated shows and video games. They being Ezra Miller, they are such scumbags. Such a scumbag that I don't know that I can give this movie any money. like this is one where, because, here's what you got to grok, right? When you are, and at some point, I don't believe in laws. I don't believe in legal frameworks. Okay. If I were into that sort of thing, at some point, like, I would be making class action lawsuits against Hollywood studios or against entertainment studios for many reasons. One of the things I would be doing is, trailers presenting scenes or even characters and whatever else in films that don't end up actually being in the film, or that grossly misrepresent what actually happens in the movie. Like purposely mislead and all. No, I think that's false advertising. And in other parts of the consumerist world, you can return a product and get your money back on that kind of shit, right? But here's the thing. So now that, and so certainly I would, if I believed in going to lawyers, this is something like, this is a legal framework I would start building up. Because now that movie studios or entertainment studios are planning out gigantic franchises, and James Gunn in that video said this is an 8 to 10 year plan. If you are investing, right, your time and literally your money into an 8 to 10 year business strategy. If you are somebody who, is excited about DC comics, DC characters and everything, and you perhaps are excited for what's coming with James Gunn, with what he has plans for the DCU, what he has planned, you are effectively an investor, right? Because you're going to go, you're even told to act like an investor. Like, hey, if you want to see this come to the table, you got to put your money down. If you want a Black Adam 2, you got to put your money down. This is exactly the kind of calls that get made to investors in the traditional finance world. And that's how they're talking to you. Moviegoers, franchise goers is what we should really call them. Franchise goers are effectively investors, and I think that they should have the same legal protections and ramifications of investors. This is, because this marketing is completely out of control. Them telling you got to vote with your dollar, show up in theaters and all this shit. Like, all of that is risky. Now, with investment, there's always risk, right? But then there are also usually protections and ways where, contracts that you sign to get out of things. And really, it's getting to that point that you are effectively, an investor in these properties. And that's, for me, I'm so disappointed that seemingly the Snyderverse, or the DCEU as it was after the not success of Black Adam, I'm not going to call it a failure, but the not so success of Black Adam, that's not going to go forward. I'm like, fuck, because look, I've bought all the Blu-rays within the Snyderverse, right? All of them, even League of Super Pets. Like I have all the Blu-rays, and here's the rub. Like, as investors, we should be able to say, okay, you can come out with a Flash movie, but you can't have Ezra Miller in it, right? Because investors get to call that shot all the time with companies. Say, yeah, okay, you want to do that plan? Then you've got to meet our demands here. And because I guarantee you that there are plenty of people who would say, yeah, okay, make that movie. No Ezra Miller. Nope. Rapist. And so many other things. This is, yeah. So this is a tough one for me, where I don't even really want to give it, like, I don't want to give it eyes. I don't want to give it optics. I don't want to put any money on it for sure. And that's sad, you know, because what I originally saw of Ezra Miller, you know, with their role as the Flash, I really liked initially, but then you find out the person's scum. And yeah, so this is a real challenge. And I'm really, really surprised that James Gunn did effectively nothing to distance himself from that, other than they're going to treat it as an entire reboot of the universe. And maybe they're going to try and spin it somehow that way, but it's still nasty. Okay. Now, the movie I did leave out is Aquaman 2, which also James Gunn sounded really excited about and is also strange. Look, Aquaman 1 was a masterpiece, and I with no exaggeration, that is a masterpiece. That movie did insane money, and deservedly so. Like, how are they going to treat that? Like, this is just, all of this is so confusing. And I'm just saying that, you know, as cautiously optimistic as I am with James Gunn, I'm a little worried because we don't really have a lot of clarity. I mean, that's fine if they want to do Elseworld shit. And in that sense, then, like, make Elseworld stuff that wraps up the Snyderverse, you know, even if it's animated, go ahead. Would Zack Snyder really say no to doing an animated film? I kind of have a hard time believing that, but maybe. You know, even just to do it, because here's the thing that, again, with this, and this is really a new thing. Like, yeah, we've always had franchises, okay, in the entertainment industry, but now these franchises are like, you know, you thought Straczynski had a big plan with a 5-year plan for Babylon 5, which, by the way, at the time, everybody thought was stupid. I said it wasn't, but everybody else thought it was. Now people are, they're doing 10-year, 20-year plans. Hell, what did Disney say with Star Wars? They have like a 100-year plan, right? Wasn't that, I mean, I don't know that they meant that literally, but that was basically what they were suggesting. Of course, they don't really have a plan, but, you know, they certainly plan on putting stuff out for 100 years anyway. Obviously, they don't have a plan. But my point being, like, franchises are very different things now, and they are ultimately investments. They are, by legal definition, they are investments, not just investments by people who have stock in Warner Brothers, okay, or Disney or whatever. They are investments on parts of the fans, part of the movie goer, the game buyer, the television watcher, okay? And you really got to think about all of this very differently. And not only do fans, I think that they'd be right to think about it differently, but also studios should be thinking about it differently. Why? Because every investor knows that the company you're investing in, one of the ways that you achieve growth is through an ancient concept called a loss leader. Okay. So if you want people to buy into your new universe, one of the best ways to do that, James Gunn, is to close out the universe that people already invested in. Give them closure. Okay. This is akin to when you know, like, say, I don't know, you have some, and sadly this doesn't happen often enough, but say when, like, Google sunsets a product, or just pick any company, like, say an IoT, okay, right, an Internet of Things device, okay, company goes under. What should that company do when the company goes under? Open source the code, open source the hardware to where, you know, those who have already invested, paid for it, and maybe even built their house around your IoT platform, can take it upon, at least have the option to take it upon themselves to allow their devices, their IoT devices and everything else to work into perpetuity, or at least as long as they can get parts, right? And do the coding perhaps themselves, or that there's a community that could do the code for them. So same deal here. Okay. Like, that's the right way to appease customers who have been investing in your products. I think this is the same deal. And, you know, again, okay, so you think that there aren't enough fans for Snyderverse films, which just isn't true. But even if that were true, wrap it up, put a bow on it so that people can move on. They have their story, they have it, and they can move on. Believe me, those people, including myself, will be very fucking happy. And so this idea of having loss leaders, I mean, if you want to have a good time, like go to a search engine and type in Hollywood taxes, and you're going to see that like whether or not a movie is really successful anyway, to some degree doesn't matter. It all comes down to paying back investors, right? It all comes down to like just look up Hollywood taxes. You can thank me later. Okay. Because you're going to see how screwed up the money game is in the entertainment industry. But that's my point, is that, allow for prestige pieces, that's a traditional term in Hollywood, allow for prestige pieces, ones that aren't going to make a ton of money, but it's to make critics happy or fans happy. Allow for what are effectively loss leaders. Okay. You're not going to make the money back on the investment. Okay. But it's going to garner future, future goodwill from your fan base. And that's a good thing to do. So they've got to think about things in this way if they are planning on doing multi-billion, and what would eventually account for probably, trillions of dollars for these franchises. You have to think about these things differently. They are not just movies anymore. Okay. They are whole fucking like alternate, universes. So anyway, there's my thoughts on all of this. Ultimately, like some of these things I think are a good idea. Others I'm like, what? Why? No, this isn't the way. But ultimately, I'm cautiously optimistic just because I do think James Gunn is a brilliant writer and a brilliant director. And at the end of the day, to appease my hero and dear friend, dearly departed friend, Harlan Ellison, isn't it exciting to finally have a writer as a CEO of an entertainment company? Yeah, that's fucking exciting. And I'll run with that for now. So that is it for this episode of TIE Fighter Renegades. Of course, we will be back with more. It'll be Rob and I. We'll rock some Star Wars, many other things. I have some solo episodes I'm going to do about Star Wars as well. No pun intended there. And because there's so much great shit going on. The comic books are white hot. They have been for the past couple of years. A lot I want to talk about there. And speaking of other phases, we have phase 2 of the High Republic, which interesting things happening there that I want to talk about for sure. So much to get into, but I will wrap this one up and I will see all of you, on the other side. TIE Fighter Renegades signing off.